Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Just make sure everybody can hear me. Um, so my name is Eric Truex, Solution Architect, and I'm going to be talking about the managing and reporting on Microsoft Teams with the Teams Admin Center. So um, let's have some fun. So here's a high-level agenda of what we're going to be looking at. The Teams Admin Center, of course, users and policies, policy packaging, Teams configuration, external versus guest access, managing teams, and then some reporting aspects. So let's go ahead and get started. So the Teams Admin Center is a great resource for administration, analytics, reporting, and information. Most of the admin functions regarding Teams can be found inside here. The goal is to be able to accomplish all of the admin functions inside of this single interface. We are not there yet. We are constantly looking at additional features and functions to bring into the Teams Admin Center. Of course, other administration methods are still available, whether you want to use PowerShell, API, or Graph. Remember to give us feedback on your experience. That is how we know what we are getting right or what we should be changing or adding. The solution is always evolving. So here we have some of the important points about Teams Admin Center is created and our intention around what we want your experience to look like. We want to give you and your customers a customizable, responsive, real experience. We support 40 different languages. This is another big area where feedback is important to us. Let us know if the way we word certain phrases doesn't make sense or could be improved to help people understand what we are trying to say. We put a lot of effort into translating all of this information, but sometimes industry-specific information can be difficult to get the nuance of what we are trying to communicate across. So here's a full list of currently supported languages. You may notice Klingon is not on the supported list, and I personally am pushing hard to get that added. Here's a high-level illustration of the Teams Admin Center. It shows the basic flow of how an administrator can make a change in the Admin Center. That change goes to the M365 cloud, which creates a unique experience for the different types of users, whether that user is an office worker, a field worker, or executive. Each user's experience in Teams can be tailored for their specific needs. However, this may be overly simplified representation for some people. This is a more accurate portrayal of what happens while we are making changes in the Teams Admin Center. As you can see, the Teams Admin Center is going to sit in front of an Azure Front Door Anycast ring, which will go over to one of the regional Bootstrap services, depending on where you are in the world. This content will all be delivered by a CDN that is backed up by a blob storage. There are a lot of backend services that we are referencing and using to drive the features you see in the Teams Admin Center, with a lot of redundancy and failover built into the solution. This can help to illustrate why some changes may take a short time to replicate in the Admin Center. So we have tried to organize the Admin Center into an intuitive, subject-oriented space with high-level groupings that are relevant to the actual Teams experience. We offer the different sections of the Admin Center for people to be able to quickly find a setting or policy relevant to accomplishing a given task. As you can see, these are high-level sections that include nearly everything you would need to do inside the Admin Center. So we're going to go ahead and do a demo. If you want to take a second, that's the URL for the Admin Center. If you want to log into your own tenant, you can do that. Just don't forget to watch. So here we see this particular demo tenant, which happens to be mine. And when you initially log into the Admin Center, you're going to land at the dashboard. This is a great space where we get to see a lot of information right from the get-go. One of the first things you see is Microsoft Teams upgrade. Let us know what the current status is on going with that. I happen to know that this demo tenant is pretty well along on going to Teams because it's mine. I'm going to click that, and it's going to give me the next piece of relevant information that may be applicable to our deployment. Next to that, you're also going to see a deployment task status. Once again, we're 100% complete. We're completely on Teams at this point. We can see that planning your upgrades to Teams is the next relevant piece of information that we're going to get presented with. Next to that, we can also do a user search for a quick lookup of a particular user. We have a quick dashboard item of Teams user activity. As you can see, about 3 days ago, this tenant got very busy, almost like we were going to start using it. And then we also got some organizational information that is presented to us. Now, down below here is what I personally feel is the best part of this dashboard. And that's links to relevant information that I want to look up or see. You've got training resources, learn more resources readily available right inside the dashboard. A couple of the things that you want to look at in here is the dashboard itself here on the left side has the different sections that we'd referred to earlier. I can collapse this or expand it so that I can see different items. Each one of these sections, well, nearly each one of these sections has a subset of information associated with that particular area. So for meetings, if I wanted to look at all the different meeting information, it's underneath the meetings. So this is a very logical, intuitive approach to being able to see information relevant to what you want to do. And just as a note, inside of Teams, nearly all the information presented to you is going to be in a table format. Very nice, easy to use demonstration of it. So one of the things I can do over here on the right side is I can go to edit columns and choose which pieces of information are relevant to what I want to see. For example, I would like to know who has phone system assigned, but I really don't mind about their location. And no, I think the rest of it's pretty good. So if I hit apply on that, at that point, the view is going to change to let me know that this information that I want to see is now presented to me. I can also go into filter. So when we start talking about these larger deployments with tens of thousands of users, we don't want to have to scroll through that many users in order to find them. We can start filtering out information on different parameters like display name, emergency calling policies, these different parameters that narrow down to specific pieces of information that we want to see. So let's go ahead and start talking about some users and policies. Excuse me. So let's start with defining the difference between a policy and a setting. As you can see, both are collections of elements generally grouped by modality. However, policies allow us to set a number of settings together in a grouping for easier application to either a single user, multiple users, or even tenant-wide, such as a global policy or default. While a setting is a singular change that only affects that area, we are working on being able to apply a policy to an OU group to streamline that process even further. Here we want to show a representation of how some of the different policies and settings affect different areas in the admin center. We're hoping to give you a sense of the methodology we used when deciding whether an item should be a standalone setting versus being included into a policy. There are a few different reasons that something may be a setting versus a policy. These could be a technical reason. The protocol doesn't do that. A practical reason. It would be abnormal for it to behave that way. Maybe it was a business reason, like the customer experience is deemed to have performed better this way. Sometimes it was timing. We simply needed to do something else first to put this in later. This is another important area where feedback is crucial. So let's look at some of the different items that are settings or policies and the different areas they can affect. These are examples of settings that apply tenant-wide. So bridge numbers are set per tenant and made available to all users in the deployment. Federation is another good example of a setting that affects everyone in the tenant. We don't currently have the ability to separate the federation experience that different users may have. Guest access, like federation, is also a tenant level feature, meaning all guests will have the same experience and abilities. Now, they can be separated on to which teams they access, but the features that they are able to use per team or channel is synonymous between all of them. Here are some of the settings that are set at the user level. You see things like audio conferencing, which lets us make some choices around which conference bridge a user is going to use in their meeting invite, or Teams upgrade state. This is particularly important to keep inside of a setting so that we can have more granular control of a user's upgrade experience from Skype for Business to Teams. And now we see some settings that apply to individual teams. These are things that, once again, are only going to affect that specific item that is being modified. Things like adding channels to a team or management of a specific team regarding members, owners, and even private channels. Now let's look at some policies inside the Teams Admin Center. So when it comes to policies, we know that we are able to set these at the tenant level, which is our global or default policy. This is what will be applied to a user if no other policy has been assigned. This is the highest level policy we have access to. We do have the ability to modify the global default policy to whatever we want it to be. You're going to want to take the time with your customers to go over what default behavior will look like. Do you want to limit features and functions of users until a business decision has been made that enables certain items? Do you want to allow everyone to have full unfettered Teams experience and only limit those that require it? We have set the global policies with what we call smart defaults. These are going to work for most customers with little changes being needed. This slide helps us to illustrate the ability to create unique policies that can be assigned to users. You can have many reasons for creating user policies. There can be business motivators, regulatory obligations, security concerns, or even simply user preference. Taking the time to understand your customer's precise needs will allow you to tailor the experience they have inside Teams. This will increase adoption, improve satisfaction, and make for an overall happier customer. So I'm going to go through a list of all the available policies that can be created inside the Teams Admin Center. Meeting, messaging, live events, app permission, app setup, call, park calling, caller ID, Teams, emergency calling, emergency call routing, dial plan, and voice routing. Now, I went through that fast, and I apologize. All of these particular policies are available in the Teams Admin Center, and we're going to take a look at those. But what I want to illustrate is that you have a lot of opportunities to make your user experience in Teams as unique as possible. We are currently working on deploying policies that can be applied at the team level rather than the tenant or user level. So keep an eye out for this feature. We are also working on the ability to assign policies via group membership. Once a policy is assigned to a specific group, that setting of that policy will automatically propagate down to all the members of that group. This will streamline many administrative tasks. This is very similar to how a lot of on-premise solutions used to be able to assign a security group to membership, and that membership dictated a lot of the experience those users would have. So we're bringing that type of functionality into the cloud environment. So look forward to that coming. So let's go ahead and take a look at the demo and look at some users and policies. So first off, I'm going to start off the dashboard. And what we're going to do is take a look at a couple of settings. One of the first things we're going to look at is the tenant settings. So going down to org-wide. So this section is called org-wide settings. So that should let you know that it's a settings area. And it's org-wide. So inside of team settings, I can look at different things here that are going to affect the team's experience for every user in the organization. So as this spins up, we're going to get different options around this that are relevant to cloud storage and tagging and different features and functions that are directly related to the team's experience. One of them is suggested feeds that can appear in a user's activity. So remember that all of these options will affect all of your users in the Teams environment. Another one that we can look at that we talked about is Conference Bridge. So I'm going to go over to the meetings, and go to Conference Bridge. So as this pulls up, one of the things you're going to notice is that we're going to get a lot of phone numbers that are common to all Teams deployments in the world. These are Conference Bridge numbers that anybody can use to dial into the Microsoft 365 environment. And once they put in the unique meeting ID, they will enter that meeting. We also have the ability of assigning an individual service number that we own to that service. So we've done that here. Right here is the toll number that we decided is going to be used for our conferencing. And you'll notice that it says default. I have the option of selecting this as the default conferencing number, that when a user creates a meeting invite, this number will be presented in that invite as the PSTN number to call. So there is an important tenant-wide setting here that really should look at if you're firing up Teams for the first time. Meeting entry and exit notifications. This particular feature is on by default and is commonly asked to be turned off. This is the feature that while in a meeting, if a PSTN caller joins the meeting, it says so-and-so has joined the meeting. And when that caller hangs up, it says so-and-so has left the meeting. Some people find this experience to be problematic inside of a meeting. Sit down with your customers and consider whether or not that experience is what they would like to see. We can also set pin length and choose whether or not to automatically send emails to users. Once again, these are tenant-wide settings that will affect everybody inside the Teams deployment. Another one that we can look at is the user settings. So these are settings, not policies, but they are set at the user level. So I'm going to go up to users here, and I'm going to choose Emily Truex. She seems nice. So as this loads up, what we see already is a lot of great information around the user. We can see the telephone number, we can see the audio conferencing, we can see a location, we get to see a brief snapshot of what activity that user has had recently. So as we go over here, I see that audio conferencing is listed right on here. Notice that it's not on the policy section. So here's where I can tell, is audio conferencing turned on? The conference ID information, the PIN information, what default conferencing toll number is currently being used. You may notice that that particular number is not the one that was our default. That's because at some point in time, Emily decided that she wanted to be in Milano, Italy. So for the duration of that time, we chose to have her meeting dial-in information be in Milano, Italy. I think she likes it there. So another piece of information that you really want to look at here is the Teams upgrade. So this particular section is what is going to control the user's experience while going from Skype for Business to Teams. Here we can see the different options, and you really need to take the time and work through a process that's going to make the best experience during that migration. If you aren't fully aware of the implications of all these different settings, let us know. We can absolutely help with that, because a good migration of a user from Skype for Business to Teams makes everything better. And a bad one can leave a poor impression. So we definitely want to help make sure that that particular process goes as smoothly as possible. We leave that as a per user setting because of the sensitivity of that. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of policies. So for one here, we've got meeting policies. Now, something you're going to notice is what we talked about with the global policy. That's the org-wide default. This means that when a user is enabled for Teams, this is the experience they're going to have. Each and every one of our policies has a default. And it's important to go through each one of those with your customers and say, is this what you want your experience to be for a user when no other administrative functions have happened? We've simply enabled them for Teams, and now they're having this result. Now, I've had some customers say, you know, when somebody's enabled, I want to have a very restrictive default. I don't want them to be able to do things until I allow them to do things. And that's okay. We have our smart defaults set at a very inclusive experience where users are able to use nearly all the functions of Teams, because we found them to have a better adoption rate when automatically, without a business process in the way, they're able to quickly create teams and add channels and use memes and Giphies, all these fun things that we enjoy that increases in collaboration and increases their experiences altogether. But that's a very individual result that you need to talk to your customers and yourself on what you want to see. But as you see here, you can go through and change that default org-wide policy to whatever you want it to be. We can decide here that we don't want to allow IP video. Perhaps we have a bandwidth issue that we're currently in the process of working through. So we want to turn off that allow IP video by default until we get that process worked out. You may want to change content sharing or participants and guests. All of these settings individualized. So when we go back to the policies, though, you can see that there's several others. when it comes to creating policies, there's a rule of thumb that I like to use. Create as few policies as you can, but as many as you need. The reason why I have that rule of thumb is so that you don't clutter up your administrative functions with just a ton of policies that are redundant to each other and unnecessary. I had an organization that I was working with one time decided that they wanted to create a policy for every group so that they had a sort of experience of when you assign a person to a group, they would get unique features like the on-premise solutions. They wanted to try and replicate that with policies and teams. Well, what we ended up with was hundreds of policies that were completely redundant and unnecessary. It cluttered up the environment and made it very difficult to go through and choose, oh, this person should have this. When people moved groups, that was cumbersome and difficult. So try and keep your policies to as few as possible, but still remember to have as many as you need based on the motivations of, governance, business choices, user preference, whatever it is. So one of the things we did here, just for fun, is I made a block all meetings policy. I really don't have a business justification for this. I just wanted to see if I could do it. So I did. I blocked all the Meet Now, Outlook add-ins, channel meetings, and the scheduled private meetings. I wanted to see if I could take a user and completely block their ability to create meetings. So not my recommended policy to use, but it just shows you that you have a lot of ability to create a unique solution inside the policy structure. But one of the other things that you're going to see on here is we have what I generally will create as a standard user. This is similar to the global default if you're using a very restrictive default. So let's say you said, I don't want to enable IP video, I don't want to do these other things. But once a user has been enabled and has now requested additional functions, what does that look like? And you can create a policy around that standard user that then creates the experience that would be normally had for a user. And then, of course, you can go to the other extreme, allow everything. This was my personal favorite. It turns on every single feature. I mean, some of them I really would never use, but just I want it turned on, and you can do that. This is going to be for like your super users, your trusted people, maybe administrators or executive admins that need a lot of horsepower behind what they're doing, but you know that they're going to use it well. So while we're looking at policies, let's take a quick second and look at a couple others. So we have the meetings policies that we've talked about. Let's look at messaging policies. So this is an area that controls the chat experience and what's going to happen with that. Once again, you can see that the global default is already set. And for this particular one, it's a very wide open default. One of the things you might want to look at is the Giphy content rating and whether or not you want to allow Giphies in a conversation. Some organizations decide that that particular feature is not welcome inside of chat by default. Once again, look through that with your customer to decide, is this something that we want to see? Memes and stickers are another one. I personally think they add a lot of flavor to a conversation and help people stay engaged, but that is a personal choice that each organization has to make. But this is an area where if you see I made a most restrictive, a least restrictive policy that can easily be assigned. These short list of policies would fit most organizations I've ever worked with. Just by setting a few things that say this is more restrictive and least, I'm creating an environment with just a few level of policy I'm able to accomplish most needs. And once again, for fun, I created a chat disabled one because I could. I was attempted to create a user and give them all the disabled policies and log in to see what the experience would be, but I haven't done that yet. I'll probably do that after this. So let's go ahead and take a look at one more policy that's kind of fun and new, and that is the app permission policy. So over here, where we go, Teams apps. So we have a couple in here that are really neat. So the apps inside of Teams, in case you haven't seen it yet, is down in the left-hand corner. You can add a lot of useful tools inside of the Teams experience. So we do that through apps, and we've got 3 tiers of that. We have Microsoft apps, we have trusted third-party apps, and we have tenant apps. So by default, we allow all apps inside of Teams. This is another area why I bring this up, that a lot of customers and organizations don't feel really comfortable doing this. Perhaps they want to secure it more. They want to make the experience inside of Teams more consistent for everybody. So they decide to turn some of those features off. Excuse me. So here's a couple of common ones that I've used where we have the global default, which allows everything. Then we can say we're going to block all apps, and that's going to block Microsoft third-party and tenant apps. We can say we're going to allow most but block some. So this particular one shows that, okay, so Microsoft apps are allowed. We're going to block specific third-party apps, but then allow all the others. These particular ones got blocked. I just picked them randomly. And then there's a more common one I've seen deployed, which is we're going to block most and allow some. So what you do in this particular situation is you say all the Microsoft apps you're allowed, but third-party apps, we're going to have a business process that is going to scrub through these apps. And part of that business process is once we've determined that that is an acceptable app, we'll go ahead and approve it and put it on the now allowed specific apps list. That gives all the features of those specific apps to your users inside of Teams, while still giving you a layer of governance and control over the experience they're going to have. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about another cool feature that we've recently deployed called policy packaging. And I'm going to go back to the presentation for this because we have some really good information. So policy packages are a preset grouping of policies that we have optimized for specific types of users. While you are not required to use these policies, they do allow for streamlined policy assignment. Each one of the individual packages comes with a unique set of policies that is designed to work for that job type. You can also customize the policies to fit your specific use cases. So there are several policy packages available. Assigning these policy packages can be in the policy package section or in the user section like other policies. This is a great time-saving administration tool. Much like having policies as a grouping of common settings saves from going through and setting each and every parameter for a user, we can now deploy multiple policies with just a few short steps. Let's go take a look at it. So in here, we click on policy packages and we see the preset list. Currently, we don't have the ability to create policy packages, but that is something that's being looked at. So we have a few higher tier items. We have 4 different education ones: healthcare clinical worker, healthcare information worker, public safety officer, small and medium business user, small and medium business user without voice. So one of the important things to look at here is as I click on the education teacher policy package, remember that we had 10, 11 different policy sections inside of the Teams Admin Center. But when this comes up, we've only got 5 here. That means that we've determined that the remaining policies defaults are good for this particular role. We've only had to modify these 5 different policies to fit into what we believe would be a great policy package for the education teacher. So we do have the ability inside of here to click that and go through and edit this particular policy inside of the policy package to make sure that it fits exactly what we want that education teacher's experience to be. You can see that one of the big ones is being able to remove users from group chats. As somebody who's been helping a couple of schools lately go to Teams, that's a big feature. One of the other cool things about Teams Admin Center in general is if you look up here at the top, I'm able to go back to the previous section based on just clicking the link above. So from here, I can see these policy packages, and I'm going to go back here and let's take a look at what it takes to enable this. So for education teacher, I'm going to go manage users, and I'm going to go ahead and type a name in of a user that I think would benefit from having this policy package. Now, once this populates, we're going to see a piece of information right there that she already has the education teacher package because a lot of teachers work from Milano, Italy. So I'm going to have to not assign that to there. So I'll choose somebody else and see if that person has a policy package. And actually, it says none. I'm going to wait to assign this package because it takes a while and go ahead and show you the other way where we can assign a policy package. So inside of users, as this populates, we're going to have the option of going in and selecting that same user. And as this pops up, I can click over on policies and you see all the different assigned policies that are there. And one of the things I can do is select a policy package. As I click edit on that section, I now have all of the different options available to me to select which policy package would be right for this particular user. Once again, I'm going to cancel all of that and go back over here to the dashboard. Let's take a minute now and talk about Teams configuration. And for that, I need to go back to the deck. Each customer is unique. Fortunately, Teams is able to adapt to accommodate those different needs. It is important to determine how your customers are going to use Teams. Are they going to be more concerned with security and controlling the experience? Are they a cutting edge, try new things type of environment that is less concerned about security and control in favor of innovation and invention? Most organizations are going to be some mix of these extremes. Be careful not to assume that because they want to be more security conscious, they don't also want to allow more user controlled features. While many times these temperaments go hand in hand, they are not exclusive to each other. Take the time to go over these features in detail to make sure your customer's Teams experience is the best that it can be for them. So over the next few slides, let's look at several common policies and settings. We're going to look at what areas they are administered from and what groupings they are applied to. We're going to be specifically looking at some settings that fall outside of the Teams Admin Center, because as I said, while our goal is to create the Teams Admin Center as a single source of administration, we're not quite there yet. So I want to show you a few other areas that you might need to go to. So here we have a collection of global settings that can be found in the Teams Admin Center. You will find these things like cloud storage options, tagging options, email integration. We took a look at this earlier. These are settings that will impact the entire Teams deployment, hence why it says Teams as the icon. And it will be found in the Teams Action Center or the global settings. Here we have a policy object that is found in the Teams Action Center. With messaging policies, you have a global policy that is assigned to all users by default. You can also create unique user policies that can be assigned to people as well. As we've talked about, this is going to have options such as chat turned on, allow translation, memes and Giphy, allow URL preview, immersive reader. But as we can see from the top part of the slide, this is a Teams Action Center policy or Teams Action Center item that is user specific due to it being a policy. The ability to create teams is controlled by the group creation features in Azure AD. Because all teams are Microsoft 365 groups, we recommend that you allow all users the ability to create teams. However, if admins want to limit the number of people that are allowed to create a team, they can use security groups to limit that feature to selected people. The link in this slide has nice detailed instructions how to complete that process, and we'll distribute that out. But I also want to show you where the group settings is. So if you wanted to start that process or at least know where to go, you can see it. So let's flip back over to our demo tenant. So for this, I have to go over to the Azure AD administration. And I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh on this because I have a feeling that my login timed up, and it did. So from here, one of the first steps, if you go through that doc that we provided, is going to tell you to create a security group. So you also have to learn this PowerShell script that is super easy to do. And it sets certain parameters so that only members of this security group are allowed to create teams. So this particular security group that I created was called Teams Creation Allowed. I know it was really creative of me. So I can go in here into members, and as long as my user is a member of this security group, they're going to be allowed to create a team. By default, new users that I create are not a member of this team. So I have to create a business process in which to automatically add them as part of either employee creation or team creation, or possibly a request after the fact. So the naming of teams. For some organizations, the ability to control the naming of teams is important. Joanna talked about this in good detail. We can set parameters around allowed words, naming conventions, and such in the group naming policy of the Azure AD Admin Center. Once again, because a team is an M365 group, this is controlled through that group admin section. Let's take a look. So once again, let's start at the top. We'll go through to groups, and we can see right here a naming policy. Much like warning labels have a purpose, blocked words have a purpose too. And we're able to upload a CSV file with certain blocked words that won't be allowed in a team's creation. This is important. While we want to give everybody artistic expression to be able to name teams what they would like, there is sometimes a need for a certain control mechanism in place. You can also have a group naming policy. This is really good for complex team creation. I had one organization that I was working with that created teams for different projects every week, and then they would move from team to team to team. Well, those project codes were built into their business process. So each one of those things had a prefix automatically assigned, so they didn't have to add additional information to that. It was a great example of building in some of our policies into their business processes to make things easier for them going forward. Many organizations want to retain information inside of teams. This can be motivated by governance concern, legal obligations, human resources, or management requests. These are set up and administered in the security and compliance section of M365. So let's take a look at that area. So from here, we go over to security and compliance. Now, this is an entirely separate section. And as I hit refresh on that, look at that. That one didn't make me ask. So we're able to go down here and go into information and governance and look at our retention policies. So in here, you're going to see I created a specific team retention policy. As I click that, it gives me the information around that specific retention policy that says, I want to keep Teams channel and messages, Teams chats, I want the retention period to be delete if it's older than 2 years. So this is a pretty basic setup that I have for the demo tenant. But it's also not difficult to go in and edit that policy as you see fit for your organization or your customers. One of the things I want to show you real quick. So we've been in the Azure AD admin portal, and we've been in the security and compliance, and we've been in the Teams admin center. An easy way to get to any of these admin centers is from your Microsoft 365 admin center, the base layer, admin.microsoft.com. So from here, I can choose admin centers, and that's going to bring up a list of all of the different admin centers so that I can quickly go between them. Myself personally, I like to add favorites for each one of the different admin centers so that I can quickly go between them and log in as needed. Like naming conventions earlier, the expiration policy is set in the group settings area as well. These settings control how long M365 will keep any inactive groups. Joanna talked about this earlier. Team owners will get notifications about expiration, 30, 50, and 1 day before expiration. Once a team is considered expires, we will have 30 days to recover that team. Let's take a look at that inside of the demo tenant. So I'm going to go back over to our Azure AD Directory Admin Center, and here we have expiration. Now, I've set this to a pretty liberal amount, which is if a group is inactive, which means that no activity has happened on that group for 365 days, go ahead and for these selected teams, start the process of deleting that team. Now, you can choose all teams, no teams, or just selected teams for that option. I had one customer, actually the same one that had all the unique naming, that once they moved those projects, every week they were creating a new team, and they would have a dozen or so people that were on all these teams in their organization. So they were creating hundreds of teams a week and then abandoning them within a couple of weeks because that particular project would ramp down. So they were taking files and storing them off as they had to for their regulatory requirements, but the teams were sitting there not being used. Now, they did have a business process where the team owner was supposed to go back and delete those teams that weren't being used anymore. However, due to a myriad of reasons, sometimes the team owners didn't get around to that. So they ended up setting a team's expiration policy to 1 month. They looked at that and said, if this team, which is now cluttering up at an alarming rate, is not being used after 30 days, another 30-day counter will tick off and it will automatically be deleted. It allowed for their group creation to be dropped by almost 75%. Because of the speed and complexity of how much they created teams, that particular application worked well for them. Now, that's a very customized individual application of the expiration policy, but it may help in some instances to look at automating that process of cleaning up teams, i.e. groups. So role-based access control allows administrators to assign a certain level of administration function to other people in the organization. So this is very similar to on-premise solutions that had the same type of functionality. So we have service administrators, communications administrators, support engineers, support specialists, with the different levels of function that they're going to be able to create. This particular feature is set in the Azure Admin Center. Let's take a look at that. So inside of Microsoft 365 Admin Center, I'm going to go up here to users, to active users, and I'm going to pick somebody. Let's say Emily. And I'm going to go to manage roles. From the manage roles options, I can see currently she's set to just user. I select Admin Center access and select teams. And also I can go down and select team service admin. And where else? I'm not going to save those changes. So I can assign the teams, the individual team service administrator, communication administrator options inside of the Azure AD admin tool for individual users. Let's go ahead and click on her. And manage roles. Oh, team service admin. So in order to avoid having to go through that, let's move on. So let's talk about external versus guest access. External access, also known as federation, is how we allow Teams, Skype for Business, and Skype users outside of our own organization to communicate with us. When setting this up, you can choose to disable external access, enable everyone, enable only specific domains, or block only specific names. I want to take a look at this because it has a special nuance that you should be aware of. Back over to the Teams Admin Center, we're going to scroll down here to external access. So when this comes up, you'll see that I have turned the feature on so that by default, people are allowed to communicate with me. Now, without any other intervention, once I turn this feature on, I'll have what we used to call open federation, which means any organization can try and look up information and try and contact me. I can also have the options of users can communicate with Skype users. That's great. But the nuance I want to communicate to you is when you add a domain, if I add a domain to the blocked list, that says by Traverse that all other domains are allowed. Okay, that makes sense. But the reverse is also true. If I turn this feature on, which gives me an open federation, and then I add a domain to the allowed list, all other domains are now blocked. And that's an important thing to remember, that you're not explicitly allowing a domain, you're allowing that domain and turning all other domains off. It's important to be aware of that because it could lead to a couple of issues when users are trying to communicate with outside entities. Now, of course, you can add multiple domains into the blocked list or allow this however you want to administer that. Once again, a very individual thing that you want to look to your customers and their organizations on how to implement that. So Guest access is a feature where M365, where we allow a person to have limited access to Teams as if they were a user in the deployment. We're able to put controls around what these guest users can access and features they are allowed to use, such as making private calls, using video, sharing screen, chatting, memes, stuff like that. Let's take a look at some of the features we have for that. So right here is guest access. And remember, both of these external and guest access are settings that are tenant level. So which means that all users are going to have the same external access features and abilities. All guests that we bring in are going to have these same feature sets. Now, they can be assigned to only access certain teams and certain channels, but the features they're going to be able to use inside of those teams and channel are going to be consistent across all of the guests. So the first is, do we want to allow guest access in Teams? Kind of a big one. Being able to make private calls, allowing video, allowing sent messages. Now, you may notice on here that these particular features are organized in very familiar areas. Calling, meeting, messaging. Those are all separate policies that we can assign. We've just taken specific features out of that area and said that guests may need certain restrictions around using that content in the environment. By default, we allow the guests in our tenants to be able to do nearly everything as if a normal user would be able to do. But make sure to take the time with your customers and their organizations and say, is this the experience that you want those guests to have? So managing teams. Love that. So inside of the Teams Admin Center, we have the ability to control many features of specific teams and channels. We can create channels, we can set owners, we can add members and change options on a per team basis. Now, we are able to take a specific team through its entire life cycle. This includes creating the team, assigning owners and members, creating channels inside the team, assigning specific features for that team and those channels. We have found that early in the Teams deployment process, while users are getting more comfortable with Teams, there is more of an administrative request that come in to help people managing their teams. But as people become more comfortable with Teams, they're able to accomplish many of these tasks on their own. Teams clients, reducing the administrative workload by allowing the users to do that. But through the Teams Admin Center, you can control from cradle to grave what a team looks like and how it behaves. One important aspect of that is when a team dies. I know it's a bit of an overly dramatic statement. However, it is important to plan for how to deal with that. We've talked about that a little bit earlier and how knowing what happens with that team, i.e. group, after it has lived out its usefulness is an important business decision to keep your admin center and your tenant a cleaner administrative environment. So let's go ahead and take a look at the team section of the Teams Admin Center. So like it's kind of important, they put it right up at the top. So we're going to go into Manage Teams here, and as this populates, you're going to see the familiar table view with different pieces of information that are relevant to that particular segment. So over here, I can also, like before, decide which columns I want to see and which ones I don't. So we have classifications, group IDs, so I really don't need to see classifications, and I'm not too worried about the description. I do want to see the status, and I'm really not worried about the group ID either. So once I apply this, it narrows it down to the piece of information I want to see. So I can choose any of these particular teams. So the Mark 8 project team. I can go in here and look at what particular things are important. Do I need to change the owner? Do I need to make it so that certain people are in the team? Do I need to add them based on where they're at? Perhaps there's a business case for changing channels, creating a new channel, maybe removing an existing channel. All of those options can be administered inside of here. I can also take and say, okay, within this channel, I want to set certain things like, where's that? There it is. So I want to set whether this is a private or public channel. So all of those settings inside of there are able to be done right in the Teams Admin Center. We also have settings like here where you have conversations and channels across the board. Now the edit button for this is way up in the corner. That's why I can't do it. I archived this team. I should practice more. So I'm going to go ahead and unarchive this team so that you can see what it's like to actually do a couple of those features. So from the Mark 8 project team, I'm going to go over here to channels, and I'm going to go ahead and add a channel. Now I have the choice of naming this new channel, and what if I want to make it a private channel? At that point I can do that, but I also have to set an owner. And I can choose an owner at that point. I'm not going to make the change at this time, but I just want to show you how that could be done. I can also look at members and say I want to add a member or remove members based on those things. So, and as we talked about before, that expiration life cycle, that's 80 group settings of the expiration, it's very important to consider if that's applicable to your customers or yourself. So let's talk about reporting. We have a robust reporting and analytics engine to give detailed information about user activity, device usage, live event usage, PSTN information. This gives us a great snapshot of teams across the tenant as a whole. We can look up not only voice and video calling information, but teams and channel usage as well. This can all be done right inside the Teams Admin Center. Here we also get to see PSTN usage reports. This will include traditional CDR information as well as data from direct routing and per minute pools for the tenant. We're also able to get to see information about how the Teams rich client is being used. Apps usage reports will be included in this area as well. This is probably one of my favorite areas in the Teams Admin Center. We have taken data that traditionally could only be gathered from separate tools and presented it inside the same area as the user information. This allows admins to quickly and easily flip between examining what happened on a user's call to what settings and policies are applied to that user. This is one of the most intuitive additions to the Teams Admin Center yet. Having all of the information so closely coupled together saves countless job hours from flipping between different tools and systems and trying to align data points to confirm you have the same conversations or calls. Now you're able to look at that user having an issue and see exactly what happened right from one screen. We're definitely going to look at that. So from here, I'm going to go down and look at the analytics and reports section real quick. Now, I don't have a lot of data in here, but let's just take a look at Teams user activity. We're going to select the last 7 days and run report. As you can see, there was a dramatic uptick right around May 1st. I wonder why. So as this data points, we can see the different users here that are doing different things inside of the environment. I'm able to look at audio time, video time, screen sharing time, last activity, all the different points that might be relevant to information that I need. I can also look at device usage to see where are my users coming in from. Now it looks like most of them are coming in from Windows, but we also have iOS and Android users. Once again, good pieces of information to help you determine exactly what's going on inside that tenant. Another fun area is the PSTN. So from here, and I believe one of the people are going to be going into this into a little more detail, but I want to show a particularly interesting feature. From this PSTN usage report, I can actually click this name, Eric Truex. He seems pretty cool. Nice guy. I like him. I'm going to go ahead and click on that name, and it brings me right into the user page. I'm now able to go right from the analytics page into the user page to drill down further into specific information that I need to know. So I can go from here into call history and start looking at the specific data that I want to find. So let's see. It looks like Eric Truex had a call with Jake Truex. And now I get to see all the different information going across here. I can click on these data points and determine what was happening here. I can also go into advanced. This is very similar to the traditional methods of the snooper and CS logger, where you get a lot of that same information. I happen to know this particular call was very quick, So I'm going to go back out. Once again, I can click up on the top here and go back out to whatever level I would like to see. Oh, let's look at a good one. This is a good one. So from here, each one of the individual sessions in this particular event has been logged, and I can take a look at each one to see what happened. So inside of here, I see that this Eric Truex joined a Teams meeting. I get to see the different types of devices. Uh, and if Eric Truex had complained to me that he had an audio problem, I have a pretty good indication of why it didn't sound as well as it could have inside of that conversation. But I also get to look at the system, the connectivity, whether this is across Ethernet, which this was. I can once again go back into the advanced tab and see all the plethora of information related to that call. I can look at, where's that down here? Oh, this is the best stuff. So I'm looking at jitter, maximum average jitter, round time, packet loss rates, burst density, all these good tools and information sets that are crucial to troubleshooting and examining what's happening on your calls. And I get to do all of that right from the user menu. So I can jump right back out to Eric Trex, look at his policies if I need to, and say, what type of policies are going on here? Is there something restricting this? Is there a setting inside of here that I need to account for? You know, oh, I'm seeing that, nope, this is the default conferencing setting, so that shouldn't have been a problem. I can troubleshoot and administer from one source. And that is perhaps what I would take away as one of the greatest benefits of the Teams Admin Center.